Dumelang, welcome to Face the Nation. My name is Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, why does the SANDF committee chair in Parliament, Dakota Legoete, want action to be taken against SANDF Lieutenant-General Ntshavheni Maphaha for telling the truth? Maphaha recently reminded politicians of our porous borders and how the country can be properly protected without a fully equipped and resourced SANDF. Dakota Legoete will tell us why he thinks the general's comment warrants action against him. Also on the show, where is government going to find the additional 60 billion rand in additional revenue for this financial year? Reports suggest that a new budget proposal by the finance minister was rejected in cabinet yesterday. The DA says it has some ideas on where to find the money without increasing tax. The party spokesperson for finance, Dr. Burke, will share that plan with us. And then later, what difference will body cameras on police officers make in fighting crime and corruption? Well, Police Minister Senzo Mchunu joins us to discuss that and other issues. But first, my comment. So you may have seen a comment made by the SANDF's Sergeant General, Lieutenant-General Ntshavheni Maphaha at the weekend. He was speaking at the funeral of Staff Sergeant Ishmael Mulahlehi, one of the 14 soldiers who were killed in the DRC. If you missed it, here's what he said.
I'm sure many of you will know that we are sharing our grants for the poor with people who are not supposed to share the grants. And that is because we are not protected. Our borders are porous. And they're porous because you, the politicians, have decided you want a Mickey Mouse defense force. I'm sorry to say that. And by the way, the Lieutenant-General is here and protected. I'm not making a political speech, by the way. I'm just stating the facts.
So he went further to talk about, not just our porous borders, but he spoke about also the budget cuts and how that's having an impact on the resources. But have you picked up any lie in what he said? Do you think he was out of line? Because some people think he made a political speech and should have avoided that, but he didn't lie. And maybe politicians needed to hear that from a senior SANDF official. Maybe they needed to be reminded of how vulnerable we are from someone within. Because when we say it, we are dubbed as sensationalist. When the SANDF experts say it, they're accused of exaggerating. When the politicians say it, they're accused of playing politics. So I'm glad that someone senior within the Defense Force was brave enough to say it. When politicians address capacity constraints in their departments, many of them are never truly honest and transparent. They often want to save face, and they never want officials in their departments to be honest either about the reality of the situation. Remember when we had the SANDF Minister, Ntshavheni, in studio?
I can promise you that you can sleep peacefully. We will be able to defend the country. We have the capacity.
Without enough air support, without enough ships?
Exactly. With what we have, we're confident that we'll not be attacked and then find ourselves on the field. So we have enough capacity to sustain that which was supposed, but we are saying we would wish to have more capacity to even do more. But in terms of just basic sustenance, we can promise all South Africans we're capable of doing it.
That's basic sustenance. That's what they're promising us. Did you believe that you are safe and you can sleep peacefully at night, even when she herself admits to the SANDF to not having all the equipment and resources that they need to protect us? But the minister still wants to tell us we are fine, we can sleep safe at night. Remember when we spoke to the commissioner at the Border Management Authority about our borders?
terms of the work that we have started to do as the Border Management Authority, especially in terms of coordinating our effort with the rest of the other stakeholders, including members of the South African National Defence Force around the vulnerable segments on the borderline. That particular, I would say, opportunity that people would actually take, this time around, unfortunately, they would have done that at their own peril, because indeed, they will not be able to just walk into the country.
So government is often in the habit of telling us what they want us to hear. It's seldom that you have officials that call a spade a spade. And I say kudos to General Maphaha for calling a spade, right? As the saying goes, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. And I hope the politicians have heard from someone within and will do what is right and make decisions that lead to our safety and protection. On one hand, he has a responsibility to bring to attention these critical issues that affect our national security. On the other hand, as a high-ranking military official, publicly criticizing the government is seen by others as undermining the chain of command. So the question we're asking you tonight is, do you see anything wrong with what Lieutenant-General Ntshavheni Maphaha said? The SANDF committee chair in Parliament, Dakota Legoete, wants action to be taken against him for telling this truth. Do you agree with that? And do you think that he was wrong to express what he has expressed? You can share your thoughts with us by sending us a WhatsApp voice note on 078 459 1897. Remember to tell us your name and surname and where you're sending the voice note from. And please keep it at 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. We'll be back after this. Welcome back. Now, the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Defense and Military Veterans, Dakota Legoete, says comments made by Lieutenant-General Ntshavheni Maphaha referring to the South African National Defence Force as a Mickey Mouse Defence Force only serve to create anxiety and doubt. Legoete believes that such remarks will further widen the trust deficit in government. He joins us now in studio. Thank you so much for making time for us, Mr. Legoete. Good evening.
Good evening to you and all the viewers at home.
Why have you taken issue with what Lieutenant Maphaha said?
Look, it's not like we're taking issue. We are a portfolio committee that plays oversight on matters of defense and military veterans. Now, a general or a senior officer like a general, it's a person of privilege and a person of interest in terms of intelligence language or military language. Now, for somebody of that senior level to say other things which are anti-establishment can lower the morale of our soldiers, and it can also further create a trust deficit between the state and its people. And unfortunately, is that some of these things are said in occasions which are not correct. When there is a funeral, we are mourning. We need to go there to console the bereaved family. And I don't think it's a platform that we need to use for other things, especially things that has to do with our lines of operations.
Based on what he said, though, was he lying?
Based on what he said, it was correct. But the occasion was not the correct occasion, because it was a funeral. If he has to say anything about the state of the National Defence Force, he's a member, as a general of the Military Command Council. He can say those things there.
And maybe he's been saying them, he's not being listened to. Why must he be concerned about a sense of occasion when soldiers are dying and when families of the soldiers in the DRC are dead worried and wondering whether or not they will see their loved ones again?
Look, there's what we call military doctrine or military law, where soldiers commit to serve the nation, to be non-partisan, to respect the elected leadership, to respect the Constitution. Now, we don't create doubt in terms of our service to the nation, because we know a soldier, even though it sounds insensitive, a soldier may perish in the call of duty. And as that happens, we need to be sensitive of what we say, because in South Africa, unfortunately, we are a constitutional democracy where authorities can make reckless statements. The state can be held liable for litigation for any negligence or any doubt on the system.
Except he hasn't made any reckless statement. He's just told you, as you admit, it's just the truth. And unfortunately, government has not been effective in its communications. And I think politicians have always tried to save face. And here's one person in the SANDF who not only speaks from experience, but is saying what politicians whose responsibility is to oversee and lead their departments are refusing to admit.
Look, the point that he raises on the porous borders, it's part of the responsibility of the National Defence Force to defend the territorial integrity of the country. Now, it's part of his responsibility, so it's not that he needs to cry foul. If there are people who are illegal and undocumented, they must be arrested and be deported by officers of law, including himself. So it can be possible that somebody who has the responsibility, who's paid through taxpayers' money to do his responsibility, can cry foul. It's for instance, in the case of us as lawmakers, we can't cry foul because between citizen, between system or establishment, it's us who need to give direction. And that's why we can't allow a situation where somebody who has a position of trust can say other things, because families of the bereaved people, they don't know how their kids perished. We have not fully received the report, and already there are other things which are said. And
you've not been transparent with them. I mean, even with how the bodies of their loved ones got here. You remember when you had the minister and the deputy in parliament and the SANDF general. Remember they told you that the bodies are coming tomorrow, the repatriation. The families didn't even know. They heard from the news. So the point here is, with all due respect, I disagree that you can't cry foul. If you have a responsibility and the state doesn't support you, you've got every right to cry foul. I work for the SABC, I do this show. If they didn't provide this chair for me to sit and talk to you, I have every right to cry foul, because this chair helps in the execution of my responsibilities. This is a general who says, our borders are porous. He says, we don't have capacity to, in fact, defend the whole fence when you go to any of our borders. Why can't he express that if he's not being listened from within? And we know he's not listened from within, because what have you actually done as government and parliament to ensure that our borders are safe?
Look, as the parliament, from our side as portfolio committee, we do approve budgets which are supposed to assist generals, including the department, in the operations of their work. Now, you will know, as a portfolio committee, we don't deal directly with generals. Generals deals with the executive in the form of a minister, deputy ministers, or even the president as the commander-in-chief. So there is what we call a military command council, where general meets either to discuss the safety of the country on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis. They have an opportunity as people of privilege or interest to raise those things there, because once they raise them in public, we have over 2,000 troops in the battlefront in DRC. We have others injured. We have 14 who have perished. It creates an impression that we are a divided nation or a divided military, and it may give opponents of our country or our republic an upper hand, because we look, we can make to an extent that those who are supposed to lead the charge are complaining in public. It's not done. Even yourself, whether you have a furniture here or you don't have a furniture or you do not get your salary, it's not a matter that you can take to the public. We know what happened in SABC. We had to intervene as parliament.
But I work for the public. The SABC is a state institution. I can actually tell, I can express that to the public.
Yes, you can express that to the public, but I know what happened, because I was part of the workers at that time.
Okay, so I'm a little worried, Mr. Legoete, about the obsession we have with protocol, which I absolutely understand. When we have soldiers that are dying, when we have families that are worried about the lack of transparency and information coming from government, I don't think any of what General Maphaha said actually somehow positions us as weak. In fact, when you listen attentively to what he says, I'm appealing to you as politicians. This is someone who clearly has tried to raise this in the right channels within the department. He says, I'm appealing that when you talk about budgets for the SANDF, remember that we can't speak of an SANDF that is strong, but we still have budgetary constraints. We still have resources constraints. That's what he's saying. He's not saying we are weak, come and attack us. He's saying, politicians, I'm appealing that hear us. What is wrong with making an appeal that is going to serve you and I and the rest of South Africans at the end of the day?
Look, a military or a defense, it's a different ballgame from journalism or media or communication. It has a part of intelligence on it and espionage. It has part of capability on it. And whatever you say in military terms can be used against you as a state, either to attack you or to undermine you. So it's very much important that a proper decorum, a proper discipline is maintained in the defense force, because there we don't deal with cameras and other things. We deal with machines which are very dangerous. We deal with artillery weapons which are very dangerous. We deal with chemicals which are very dangerous, and we deal with communication, even interception, which is very dangerous. So whatever you say, whoever is an opposition to your country, an adversary to your country is watching. And whatever you say in a position of responsibility can be used against you in military terms.
The SANDF minister was here on the show. She told me that there are not enough helicopters, SANDF helicopters. She said there are not enough ships. That's compromising information. Are you calling on action to be taken against her as well?
Look, everybody now in our country, we would want to implore them to be sensitive, because we still have over 2,000 of our soldiers in the DRC. So whatever we say here or do, which is seen by other sides or opponents of our country, it can be used. I don't mind anybody saying or raising concerns on our mission, but we need to be sensitive to the lives of our soldiers who are still on the ground, to their families. We have lost 14, and it's too many. And we can't encourage a situation where we can allow a loose talk when we have soldiers at the battlefront. Least we can do is to rally behind our soldiers, to rally behind our National Defense Force and support them in these trying times.
So what do you make of what the minister said, though? Because you've called on the Military Command Council to rein in this general. You're urging the Defense Ministry and the Presidency to intervene in handling the general statements. What must happen to the minister? Because the minister was on a public platform as well, talking about the capacity constraints that exist within the SANDF.
Look, the minister accounts to the president as the executive.
No, so she accounts to you as parliament as well. That's not true.
Yeah, but on the direct operations, on daily operations, accounts to the president. We, when he appears to the portfolio committee, we will raise that particular matter with her, because we still have troops on the ground.
She's already appeared there.
Yeah.
Mr. Legoete, you didn't raise it.
No. Go to the clip. You'll see very serious questions were asked by members of the portfolio committee.
I watched it. You didn't raise what she said on a public platform.
Yes.
Here, about the capacity constraints that exist, specifically about the ships and the helicopters.
Yeah, we know that some of them, we do have challenge in terms of our dockyard to have some of our vessels go in there. In terms of other things, those are things which were raised as part of the problem of the underfunding of the Defense Force, which happened for almost 15 years now, since the last supply chain process, which is normally referred to as the arms deal. There was a public outcry from some NGOs and some institutions to say there's too much that is given to.
So it's okay for the minister to raise that publicly, but not for General Maphaha?
No, I can't get into that particular argument. The executive, both at the level of the ministry, the general also, we are playing oversight. We have the burden of responsibility to defend South Africans.
Okay.
And the minister and the general, both of them, I'm sure those who are in charge of them must reign, because we can't say other things which can compromise over 2,000 of our troops which are still on the ground in a foreign land.
Shouldn't the priority also of the portfolio committee be on focusing on the concerns that have been raised? For instance, what significant action have you taken as Parliament to show that you truly care about addressing how vulnerable this country is? Look, with the SANDF that we have, with the capacity constraints that the SANDF is dealing with, what action have you taken as Parliament to ensure we are not vulnerable? Because we are.
Yeah, look, what we have done as a portfolio committee, we have engaged the executive, we have engaged the presidency. We are moving our budget from 0.7% to the GDP to 1.5%. We want to phase in eventually 2%, because the last time we had 1.4% of the budget to the GDP of the National Defence Force. It was about before the supply chain process, which is normally referred to as the arms deal. The President has agreed. We are meeting with Treasury on a close meeting this Friday to deal with that particular matter of how we are going to phase in the 1.5%, moving to 2%, so that we modernize our military capability, we modernize the ability of the National Defence Force to defend our territory and sovereignty. Because even now, we have a challenge from the criminal element. 29,000 South Africans die every year in the hands of criminals. They are gangsters, they are extortionists who undermine the sovereignty of the state. And we can't allow a situation that we have seen in other countries. There's a person, a gangster leader in Haiti and other countries of the Caribbeans who took over a country in front of the defense force and everything. And we can't allow that possibility in our country. We have to act and act decisively. Have
you finalized your investigation on whether our soldiers in the DRC are there on a peacekeeping mission or an enforcement mission? Malusi Gigaba said that's an investigation that Parliament had started.
Yeah, you know that it is a peacekeeping mission from the information that we have received from the Chief of the National Defence Force as well as the Minister, because we are in the DRC by resolution of the head of states of the SADC region, which is referred to as a SAMI DRC mission. We are also in the DRC through a United Nations Security Council resolution 2098 to go and assist the Central Africa, the Great Lakes, to bring peace and stability in that particular part of the continent. So the issue related to it being whatever, it's not questionable. But what we need to find out is to get the report of how it led to a situation where 14 of our soldiers perished and others got injured.
So you are not investigating whether our soldiers are there on a peacekeeping mission or an enforcement mission?
That question we forwarded it to the executive, precisely even to give us a cost-benefit analysis of whether should we withdraw from that particular mission or what needs to be done in terms of bilateral agreements that we have signed with multilateral institutions.
But are you saying as Parliament, as a parliamentary portfolio committee, you are clear that this is a peacekeeping mission?
Is the briefing that we had.
And you are satisfied with that? You're not investigating further whether what you heard from the SANDF is actually the truth?
Look, any investigation or an inquiry, it's a matter that we can raise as the portfolio committee, but obviously it has to be approved by Parliament as a whole.
But nothing has been investigated so far?
So far, we are still awaiting the reports from the authorities.
The SANDF general said that the SANDF in the Eastern DRC are there to help neutralize the negative forces. And you know that that means M23, because that's what the DRC army is fighting. The very core conditions of a peacekeeping mission is that you've got to be neutral. How are we neutral as South Africa when we get into the DRC and we fight with the DRC army to neutralize the M23? That's not us being neutral. Isn't the condition for a peacekeeping mission that we have to be neutral?
Neutral, it's a correct word, because we are in the DRC through multilateral institutions, which are neutral, like the United Nations, like the SADC, and currently we have included the East Africa community, which agreed both with the SADC community that there needs to be a cessation of hostilities, ceasefire.
But that's on paper, Mr. Legoete. I'm talking about the reality on the ground. I'm saying you agree that the peacekeeping mission, one of the conditions is that you've got to be a neutral party, right?
Yes, we are a neutral party.
How are we a neutral party when we are fighting with the DRC against the M23 rebels?
No, we have never been on any offensive charge against any of the establishment, military establishment in that part of the region, up until our bases were attacked.
But the president and our government has consistently criticized even Rwanda at the United Nations for arming the M23 rebels.
No, our soldiers, what happened as an altercation between us and them, it was acting in self-defense. We have never went on any mission where a country like South Africa undermined or acted as a defense force of any country. No, we've been in over 23 missions as the country, even to Central Africa, even to Mozambique, even to anywhere.
So we're not fighting with the DRC
No, we're not fighting with the rebels. And that's why only when we're attacked.
The DRC army is not the rebels. We are not fighting with the DRC army. Is that what you're saying?
We are there to ensure that everybody between the DRC and all other groups, it's over 140 groups. The popular one, it's called M23, but there are others which are there on the ground.
But
also.
We're not fighting with the DRC army?
No, we're not fighting with the DRC army.
Okay, that's interesting because the president of the DRC is often so grateful to you at South Africa for being on the side of the DRC. But I hear you. Thank you so much for making time for us. I really appreciate it. Dakota Legoete is the chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Defense. The question we've been asking you tonight is whether you think there's anything wrong with what Lieutenant-General Ntshavheni Maphaha said. The SANDF committee chair, as we've heard, Dakota Legoete, has spoken about action that's needed to be taken against him. He spoke about issues of protocol and how when you say things like that in a position that is so high, that may cause consequences for our soldiers on the ground, but also affect the morale as well in the SANDF. Some of you have responded to that question. Kumo on Twitter says, Clement, he was just stating what is public knowledge about our borders and fact that our army is not well resourced to be big brother. It is not like he was revealing military secrets. If ours are not porous, how did al-Bashir, Bushiri, Guptas, etc. manage to leave the country? Mogale says, General Maphaha was truthful. We know that Minister Motshekga misled us into believing all is well in the SANDF, but the ANC will isolate and punish him for going public with his truth without fear, favor, or prejudice. South Africans must defend this general. Dean says, I think he was right because when things are not going well within the SANDF, we blame them, not politicians, and I assume there must be something that pushed him to say whatever he said. Melikaya says he must be protected. He's an asset to this country. The politicians who think they can mislead South Africans are now exposed. The general understood his risks career-wise, but he said those truths from a deep love of his people and his country. Thank you so much for your comments on Twitter. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back. The Democratic Alliance has proposed an alternative national budget that it believes would grow the economy and create jobs. The party says a tax increase of any kind will not happen under its watch, describing the value-added tax hike proposal of 2 percentage points of being both anti-poor and anti-middle class. The DA Finance spokesperson, Burke, joins us now via video link. Dr. Burke, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening.
Good to be with you.
What budget proposals are you making as the DA that doesn't include this VAT increase?
It's a 6-point plan that we've outlined. The first point in that plan is to say that we can't have any increases in tax, be that VAT, be it personal income tax or corporate tax. The second piece of that plan says we need to increase the collection from taxes already due by a small additional allocation to SARS. They've indicated that they can increase their collection from 63 to 67%, but which in and of itself will add 60 billion rand to the fiscus, which is the amount that might have come from this ANC VAT 2% hike. The third point in that plan is an open economy where our rail, where our ports, where our electricity network becomes available for private participation and by implication will become more efficient. Cape Town is now the worst run port in the world. It doesn't need to be that way. The fourth point in that plan is that we need to have a spending review. That spending review needs to start with a 6-month sprint and then a longer 9-month period where the efficiency we are able to unlock there gets added back to the fiscus. The fifth point is sort of like the fourth point, but it would be immediate spending cuts for superfluous expenditure that we don't need. One example is our deployment to the DRC, but I can give you many other examples. And then the sixth point in the plan, and perhaps the most critical one, is we cannot cut back on essential services. So under our plan, there will be no austerity. We won't be rolling back the number of doctors, nurses, teachers, or police officers. And it's a false dichotomy to say that if we can't have a punishing 2% VAT increase, then by implication, we must have an austerity budget. That's not the DA's position.
Yeah.
We're able to focus on things that can get cut, and that will create jobs, it will grow the economy, and it will provide an environment where businesses are able to succeed and employ more people.
And we'll get into the more details on some of the items that you've mentioned. But here's what normally confuses me, Dr. Burke, is why is it that, mostly the politicians, whenever they're suggesting options, when we come to budgetary constraints and what to cut, they always suggest options that don't directly affect the politicians. For instance, why are we not cutting the politicians' salaries? Why are we not cutting the benefits of ministers? Because when you look at the ministerial handbook, there's still benefits there that actually, if we cut off, we could save some money.
I couldn't agree with you more, Clement. You'll recall that we've, at the moment, got 32 ministers and 43 deputy ministers, of which the DA has 6 ministers and 6 deputy ministers. You don't need to be an expert at mathematics to know where the rest of those positions have gone. It's not to the other smaller GNU partners. So if we were in charge, we would have fewer ministers. We would have 1 driver at most per minister who could also take care of safety. And we would cut back on a range of the other perks. We've always said that, and we maintain that. It's absolutely ludicrous that this excessive consumption is happening in the face of a situation where more than 50% of our people are living in poverty. I cannot reconcile those two things morally.
And I mean, because you've got these ministers that are being driven, including, of course, the DA ministers themselves. They've got homes in Cape Town, in Joburg. Why do you not think that the DA also is not leading by example by saying, you know what, take one of the houses or take some of the cars. We're okay with 1 car, with 1 driver. We'll have the house in Pretoria. What are the DA ministers themselves do you think they can do to also show as an example to the ANC ministers and some of the ministers in the cabinet on where the cuts could be?
Yep, I don't want to belabor the point on ministers, but I will briefly say that some of our ministers are doing what you're describing. I know one minister that lived in a different part of Cape Town and said he didn't need a ministerial residence. Our ministers are driving, on average, 10-year-old cars with more than 200,000 kilometers on them and have, in many cases, given direct instruction that no new vehicles were to be purchased. So we are trying to lead from the front. But I think that's just a start. I'm not saying the things that you're mentioning aren't necessary. But my estimation is 30 to 50 million rand could be added back to the budget by cutting back on some of this expenditure.
Yeah.
But we are looking at a multi-billion rand problem. And there are things that we absolutely don't need that aren't focused on these executive privileges. I'll give you another example. We've got CETAs, which are meant to be these training authorities. We're spending almost 20 billion rand on them. They are poorly run. They're the subject of multiple SIU investigations. They cannot produce clean audits, and we can amalgamate and then scrap those with very little effort. Likewise, we've got the National Skills Fund, which is almost 5 billion rand in expenditures, separate and distinct from this fuss. And again, same situation, and we don't need it. We've been able to come up in just the last week with more than 30 billion rand worth of savings. And that's not, putting Treasury's resources behind finding where these spending reviews can take place and reassessing whether these entities that have nominal, heads with 10 directors and 7 employees, which of those can in fact be cut back, and why are those executives earning 4 or 5 million rand per executive per year? So there are so many areas where we can unlock efficiency, and that efficiency will serve society by creating jobs and growing the economy.
So you indicated earlier that government can find the 60 billion rand in savings from, wasteful spending instead of burdening the poor taxpayers further. But isn't that a long-term solution? I mean, you need to build in systems in government and capacitate the state, refine it to be able to deal with the high levels of wastage, that's not going to take a few months. So where is the money that is needed right now going to come from? Because some of the plans are great, but they're more long-term.
Yeah, there's a couple of points in your question, actually. I just want to counter the ANC narrative that if you can't have a 2% punishing VAT increase, then you have to find, 60 billion rand in austerity cuts, meaning we're cutting back on criticals. That's a patent lie. Perhaps to explain it to you this way, when the 1995 Mandela government unveiled its budget, if you take that amount and you work it back to 2025 money, what we call in economics inflation adjusted, that budget was 3 times smaller than the 2025 budget and 2025 money. And that government did so much more than we've been able to achieve in South Africa over the last 10 years. So it's not a revenue problem, it's an expense problem. There's another part of your question which has got to do with how soon can we implement the 30 billion rand at least of cuts that we've identified in just a week. Those things can be done very rapidly, probably sooner than these bills will come to Parliament at the moment, which is 3 to 4 months from now. And then a final point to make is the 60 billion rand in tax collection that we're advocating for will come from giving about 3.5 billion rand more to SARS, and they will then be able to take their collection up from 63 to 67%. This is tax that's already due to them, but they're not able to enforce that compliance because they're under-resourced. And I will point out there that when the microphone was on, our Minister of Finance actually said that he will happily punish SARS for coming out and saying this VAT measure won't work and we need to find another way. That's exactly the opposite thinking of what we need. What we need is a capacitated SARS that's able to collect money already due to it, not impose more taxes on poor South Africans.
Hold on, did he say he'll punish SARS?
Well, we have to deduce from the recording that he said the 3.5 that he asked for isn't coming anymore. If the recording understood correctly, he said he came here with that nonsense and that 3.5 isn't coming anymore. So, it's always hard to interpret when the mic goes on exactly what was said. But the wide interpretation in South Africa at the moment is he was saying he's pretty hurtful of the commissioner, stating what the commissioner believes is fact. And I will point out that Mr. Kieswetter has so far proven to us, we don't have a counter data point, that he's a servant of South Africa and he's trying to do the best thing for South Africa.
Yeah, I think
because he came out. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to say he did sound frustrated there, but I don't think we really had the full context, unless it's been explained publicly, of what he meant by that 3.5 billion rand. But I got you. Just quickly then, is this proposal the one the DA in the GNU has made to the finance minister? And is it fair to assume that any other budget that proposes any type of tax hike or cuts in essential services will not be accepted and voted on by the DA?
Correct. So we will not support any further tax increases, and we don't stand for an austerity budget, which is an emotionally manipulative response to where we are today. Just because we weren't able to punish South Africans last week with a 2% ANC VAT increase doesn't mean we need to now punish them with an austerity budget. If we're able to start slaughtering some of these ANC holy cows, things that have been deemed untouchable, we're able to cut in areas that are not needed so that we can give to the areas that it is needed.
All right, Dr. Mark Burke, thank you so much for making time for us. I really appreciate it on Face the Nation this evening. After the break, we'll have a chat with the Police Minister, Senzo Mchunu. Stay with us. Welcome back. During the third quarter of the 2024-2025 financial year, an average of 75.5 people were murdered daily in South Africa, according to the latest crime statistics. Although this number is significant, it indicates a decrease compared to the same quarter of the previous financial year. Additionally, approximately 128 rape cases were reported each day during this period. Police Minister Senzo Mchunu joins us now via video link. Minister, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening.
Good evening to Clement, and good evening to the viewers.
There's obviously still more that needs to be done to reduce the country's crime levels, but we're seeing encouraging statistics, aren't we? A reduction in several categories like murder, sexual offenses, robbery, and other crimes.
Encouraging, yes, in the sense that the results make you believe that you are on the right direction. But provided you do certain things to intensify and speed up your movement to that positive direction, But satisfied? No, we're not satisfied. And we've got to work even harder because the issue is, as you say, the death rate or the murder rate in South Africa is still unacceptably high. Yeah. Together with a few other crimes.
You have observed an alarming increase in attempted murder cases against children aged, 0 to 17 years. That's quite disturbing.
Very disturbing if you come to think that these are children, and these are people who are not in a position to defend themselves. Neither are they armed in any way. And so they are like ready victims for whoever would be criminal and would then pounce on these vulnerable young people. And this is unacceptable. But it is a call, a very strong call, to us as police to come in the defense of these children in this particular group. And of course, other population, other groups in the whole population. But yes, it's quite concerning, very worrying.
Let's talk about farm murders as well, because that has attracted global attention. But you have found, as the SAPS, only one farmer who was killed, I think in the last quarter, if I'm not mistaken. What do the statistics tell us about farm murders versus the killings of farm dwellers or workers?
Well, firstly, we've got as SAPS and ministry stated for a fact that there is only one farmer, where farmer means white farmer, murdered in the last quarter. But we need to adjust a little bit in terms of, I mean, when we release statistics or when we talk about farm murders, and those people who are in other categories could actually be farmers in their own right. And therefore, we will look at this going forward just to make sure that we apply correct meaning to statistics. And in terms, so we just say there is this number overall of farm killings or killings on farms, and we include everybody there. And if asked further, we can then say, oh, look, this is the number of farmers that were killed. But it helps in the context of the color of the skin in South Africa, especially if we now, our stats attract even a president of the United States and make him then want to wander around in terms of stats without any trace of evidence and so on, and say farmers, referring to white farmers. And in that score, that it is true. The statistics, and they are correct. They reflect only one white farmer in the traditional sense who was murdered in that period.
And you would wish that the next time that the US president or even some organizations like AfriForum start making these statements about, farm murders and farmers being persecuted, they would consider these statistics. But then again, these stats have never really been a point they want to consider. What about the use of technology to combat crime? What are you looking at as the SAPS? I know from the next financial year you plan to procure about 100 body cameras, with each unit costing, I think, about 29,000 rand. How do you envisage these will help combat crime?
Well, it is important to have that kind of an instrument for attached to the body of police officers when they do their job, so that there's accuracy in terms of reporting real-time activities of police, especially when they interact with people, whether they're suspects or what. And it's also very important when people talk about behavior of police, when in fact it is otherwise, in some cases exaggerated or inaccurate kind of accounts. And therefore, we value that as important. It's a pity that we don't have all the money to go big on this particular matter, because we are constrained. We have to attend to other aspects of technology that is very, very linked to our needs to fight crime. Like radios, we need them more than body cameras, while they're important. But we need cameras, not the body cameras, but cameras that would catch activities in malls, in roads, in townships, and everywhere where we are dealing with crime, wanting to reduce that. And once we've covered some of these key aspects, we can then come back to the body cameras and expand the program in terms of rollout.
Okay. I want to ask you also about this matter involving the Zanzu bar, because it's brought up issues of compliance of nightclubs. Are these nightclubs operating within their licenses, or are you failing as the SAPS to police them?
I wouldn't say we are failing, because we don't have evidence of failure in policing these the way things stand. But let me just start with alcohol abuse and what we're picking up in terms of crime stats. We see that around these places, whether they are what we're talking about, bars or taverns or what, and where there's alcohol abuse, where people drink and then get drunk and then turn against each other, whether they are women and men against women, whether they are partners and so on. But there is a pattern clearly demonstrating that some of the violent activities that we see are directly associated, including murder. They are associated with alcohol abuse and the places where alcohol is made available to people. In other words, alcohol outlets. I'm not talking about alcohol itself. I'm talking about alcohol abuse and people who go there, drink, and then they don't know where they are, what they are doing, what they are not doing. And that is a problem contributing to the high murder rate. Now, you wish, sitting here, when you look at this, when you sit, when you are in police, that you so wish that you could have a few hours of open hours for sale and whatever, and then you close at a particular time, maybe before people get drunk or too drunk, just because of the contribution of alcohol-related activities resulting into deaths and swelling statistics on various crimes.
Minister, thank you so much for engaging with us on Face the Nation tonight. That's the Police Minister, Senzo Mchunu. Here's that question again. We've been asking you tonight on Face the Nation. Do you see anything wrong with what Lieutenant-General Ntshavheni Maphaha said? The SANDF Committee Chair, Dakota Legoete, wants action to be taken against him. So do you agree? Jerry says the General must face disciplinary action because our enemies are watching. It is not acceptable. Tacho says, yes, the General did the right thing by commenting about defense. He was telling the truth, and the people of South Africa needed to hear that. So I see nothing wrong. Instead, I appreciate the fact that at least the General is not happy about the situation of our borders. Mo says, no, he was supposed to raise his grievances within the boardroom. He lacked a sense of occasion. He was playing to the gallery. Thank you for your tweets. We've also received some of your messages and inputs via the voice note line. So let's take a listen to some of the voice notes that have come through.
Good evening. The General is 100% correct. I don't think us South Africans must wait for our borders and our people to be bulldozed. We rather do an audit now, find out exactly what's true and what's false, and make sure that the people of this country is protected. That's what we need.
Good evening, Clayton. My name is Lebo from Mahike. Dakota, firstly, he should have not engaged LG Maphaha on the media space. That's one. Secondly, Dakota and his committee, they should be sitting down, diagnosing what happened, strategizing how they can assist the defense to map out a way forward, especially the financial issues and stuff like that. It's not time for grandstanding in Dakota.
Thank you for all of your comments on Twitter and on the voice note line. This is how we end the Tuesday edition of Face the Nation. We'll be back with you on Thursday at 8 p.m. Have a good evening. Cheers.